Hello everyone, it's your favorite tool in the shed and today I want to talk about one of those stories that I've sort of alluded to for years on this channel but never properly told cuz I thought it was kind of cringe, but I mean, I don't know, I feel like now is a good time to tell it and it's the fact that my elementary school um thought I was dumb. And specifically, they thought I was dumb just because I had a visible disability and couldn't speak English. So, I know it gets redundant when I say it so much in videos, but in case this is your first time watching me or seeing me, I'm Guatemalan. My native language is Spanish, although because I've spent so much time in the US, that's kind of debatable. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm the best Spanish speaker, although I consider myself fluent. And I mean, I was two when we came, so obviously, like, I wasn't speaking English um when we came to the US, obviously. And I'm severely disabled. I have all three types of cerebral palsy, um which means that I have to use a wheelchair, so I'm very, very visibly disabled as well. Also leg braces, but that's not really important. And like, as you can tell in this video, probably I spasm a lot. Like, and my muscles are just kind of constantly either tight and relaxed and tight and relaxed. And I can't control that really. I mean, I've learned to control it some through working out, but those spasms and that difference in muscle tone is not really consciously in my control. Um, and then I also have something called ataxia, which means um I have basically no balance. Again, I've improved it a little bit through core exercises, which can actually, but like, since my brain is so messed up, it has so much damage. I have no balance, guys, and fine motor movement is a lot of trouble for me. Like, for example, I can't pick up a water bottle that's full of water, like one of those that you buy from the store. Um, if it's half full, for whatever reason, my body is kind of like, okay, that's good, but like, if it's completely full, I don't know why. It's just, like, I can't handle that. My body freaks out, and I often combine with all of my other, uh, versions of cerebral palsy that I have. I either end up crushing it completely, and then the water comes spilling out, or I end up throwing it across the room. So yeah, I mean, all of that, which is to say, is that it's not like I can hide my disability. Um, and after all of my surgeries, when it was time to get me into school, this was about when I was 3 years old, which, uh, for a lot of you may sound kind of early. Like, it's like, shouldn't you be in pre-K or whatever? But I mean, if you're a special education student, um, at least in the United States, most elementary schools have pre-K for you, like from 3 to 6. Um and then you get into other special education classes. But yeah, I mean, my parents looked for a school that nearby that could serve that need for me, because that didn't exist in Guatemala at all. At least not when I was. I mean, it. Here's the thing, man. My family was wealthy, as you can probably, or I would say upper middle class, but as you can probably tell from my complexion and my features, um, but but like they literally told me, guys, that they couldn't accept me in like regular schools in Guatemala because, quote, I wasn't normal, right? So especially for wealthier families, schooling tends to start kind of really early over there. Um I guess it's what you would consider pre-K. I don't know if this is just an anglicization, but we do say pre-kinder. It's probably just an anglicism. But um yeah, bros, they literally told me we can't because you're not normal. And so for a while, that meant that a tutor would just come to my house or our house in Guatemala City and just kind of like teach me basic stuff, letters, sounds, a few phrases in English, which my sister absolutely loved. She thought it was so cute because I would tell her in a very like cute accent, "I love you." And she would have me say that all day. um anyway, yeah, until like my um my mom kind of like talked with the administrators, and they were like, "Fine, he can come, but only if a like a nurse or a the thing is, like, I know it sounds kind of weird, but mestizos in Guatemala, or Ladinos as we call ourselves, and it's kind of weird because like assimilated indigenous people are also technically considered Ladinos, but yeah, we a lot of us typically hire indigenous people to work in our homes and stuff like that and do a lot of the manual labor. I'm not excusing it. I'm just describing what went on. Right? I living in the US and being more conscious of racial and ethnic and power relations, I realize that that's kind of messed up, and that reflects um like the colonial and then the post-colonial hierarchy, but that's neither here nor there. So I went with an indigenous servant of my family. Um and yeah, guys. But when we finally decided to move here to the US, like, we went to the school, and the administration basically took one look at me and said, "Oh, you should go into the special education class." And I was there for almost 2 to 3 years, guys. So I was there. No, 3 years, because I went in to that school, I think, in August or September of 2001, into that special education class, and I didn't leave until um uh the start of the 2005 school year, which in Florida would have been in like early to mid August 2005. Um, but basically, when I went in, as the years went by, because even then I obviously wouldn't have been old enough for mainstream's classes yet. And it's interesting because the school that I went to specifically was for disabled and also gifted kids, because oftentimes, especially when we talk about neurodivergence, ADHD, ADD, I know that the medical community has a lot to say about them, and a lot of times they're stigmatized. Although I think, as far as neurodivergencies go, they are kind of more accepted now. Like, there's a lot of overlap between those two groups, more than you would expect. Like, um because again, in both cases your brain is just, it just works different. Like, you know um and so yeah, it increasingly became clear as the years went on that, like, I did not have an intellectual disability. I clearly remember, um one day we were given a maze worksheet. um I was probably around 4 or 5 years old, so this was probably around 2000, 2003 probably. um and the teacher was explaining to me how to do it. We had to, like, trace a line up to a picture of a balloon through a short maze. And um she was showing me how to do it, and she was, like, kind of very condescendingly, like, how the able-bodied talk to disabled people with their little, like, the condescending Google Gaga voice. Like, it's not even the regular way you would talk to a little kid. Even, it's even more condescending. Um, and yeah, I literally just took the pencil out of her hand. Um, and I traced the line through the maze, and I still can, like, sort of recall the expression of shock on her face. And, like, I don't really know, because obviously I wasn't as cognizant back then. Like, I didn't have full consciousness, I think. But, like, looking back on that, I think that's the first time where um where this teacher of mine, this pre-K teacher of mine, was like, wow, this kid is different. This kid is not like the other ones. And also, I just want to say that, like, there's nothing wrong with being intellectually disabled. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone by making this video. All I'm saying is that I got prejudice and I didn't uh get the, ironically enough, accommodations that I needed because people assume stuff about me just by the way I look, which, especially for those with visible disabilities but also non-visible disabilities, it's a constant um factor in our life. But also, my pre-K teacher, who I don't tell anyone I had kind of a crush on even back then. I don't think I had a latency period, but yeah, anyway, um my physical and occupational therapist, because in a school like that they had physical and occupational therapists on staff, just like always, um by talking with me and stuff like that. With them, I don't remember any specific instances really, but they started to be like, yeah, this kid is very obviously not intellectually disabled. He needs to be, um, like, he needs to be in regular mainstream slash gifted classes. Um, and um, what what can I say, guys? From that point forward, my mom, and shout out to honestly the women that always, at least educationally, there have been a few men, but the women have always stood up for me academically and educationally, and like, I really respect that, man. Like, my physical and occupational therapist and my mom fought for 2 more years to have me in mainstream gifted classes at the kindergarten level. 2 years, guys. They were so skeptical of me. Um because, like, once again, and they did this because of the way I looked, because I was in a chair, dog. Because again, all of these people that I just talked about noticed way before them, but administration, because administration is administration, didn't want to believe them. Um, it didn't matter how much they said, well, look, he's so far ahead of the other kids, he understands so and so, which they don't. What mattered was that I didn't fit their vision of what an academically gifted student looked like. And I'm sorry, that's ableism. That's systemic and individual ableism. Um and I was eventually mainstream, but it meant that I was essentially, like, I probably should have entered mainstream classes, to be honest, in 2003, or maybe at the latest 2004, but it ended up being 2005, late 2005, before that happened. And, you know, even back then, I always had a chip on my shoulder because I knew what they had done to me. Now, once again, guys, there's nothing wrong with being in regular classes or even like slightly advanced. That's what I would fall back into later on in my academic career because I just got lazy and I was your typical teenager and stuff like that. But um what bothers me is that once again this happened because of prejudice, this happened because of discrimination and ableism, and that's just not right. Because I do wonder how many kids like myself get typecast and just because they may have visible or invisible disabilities, or just because they may have lazy eyes like myself, or just because their speech might be slightly slurred, um they're not getting what they need. And it even works in the opposite direction too. You know, you can look like a completely normal person physically and still need like remedial classes and stuff like that, or special education classes. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's the discrimination portion uh that's wrong, and the fact that like no one had any input into it and that they had to fight for it. Now, interestingly, um the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act was renewed and kind of like rewritten around this time, so I think that also had something to do with it. It was the era of No Child Left Behind, which there are a lot of criticisms of that legislation that I think are very fair, but I do think that, or not even legislation, because I think it was more than just legislation, honestly. It was more of like an educational movement, but I can say that I'm one of the success stories of that push for sure. Um and yeah, guys, so I was technically held back a year without my consent. Now, I also took an extra year of high school, but that decision included me in it. It wasn't just my teachers or just the administration or whatever. It had me in it. They came and they asked me if I would be willing to to do that. I had the option to say no. I said yes because you know, I know what my needs are, just like most disabled people know, right? Um, but in this instance, yeah, I was held back 2 years, 2, 3 years. Um, you know, once again because of ableism, and this is why. This is the bigger point. This is why ultimately I think that the individualist vision of disability, of like, oh, just being like everyone else and like not really acknowledging that we have a culture, we are a people, um is so harmful. Because if we had our own institutions, our own um like educational facilities and stuff like that run by us, for us, you think like something like this would happen? Probably not, guys. I'm sorry, because in the end, and I know this as someone who has a master's degree and has studied a lot on this issue, both through lived experience and theory and all this stuff. But for anyone that needs to hear this, it doesn't matter how much money uh you make. It doesn't matter how well you integrate into society. Don't let them trick you, dog. Like, you will always be just a cripple to them. Uh and once I realized this, I for me personally, it was just so freeing. And like, I finally said, like, wow, we need communal institutions. Like I said, businesses run by us for us, schools by us for us, um recreation centers by us for us. um and it already happens, guys. I recently found out about something called co-housing. Now, there are a couple different ways to do it, but they're especially more common in the western states. But like, a group of disabled people, who have at least some, excuse me, station in life, get together, they pool their money, and they create a neighborhood for themselves, essentially, where each one owns their individual property, right? But they have communal institutions. They have unified, um and I mean unified for disabled people, um like, eating halls, mess halls, recreation centers, gyms, run by the disabled people there. Bro, how is that not goaded? I would love, and I still have to do more research on it, but I would love to live in a co-housing settlement. And it's something that I'd really like to work towards. And just in general, like, notice how people talk about body positivity, right? Um but notice how it's primarily, at least right now, only focused on weight and stuff like that, which I kind of agree, man. Like, discriminating against an overweight person isn't gonna make them be more likely to get healthy and lose weight or something like that. Duh. But at least that's something a person can usually, not always, but usually they can change that. But if you talk about, like, hey, maybe disabled men and women should get more chances in dating from both able bodied and non disabled people, because let's be honest, like, there's a lot of internalized ableism in the community, guys. There just is, like, I've encountered it a lot in trying to organize, where people, like, disabled people will tell me, yeah, I'm just not that interested in like disability issues and stuff like that. I feel like it's a losing battle. And like, I'm not saying it has to be your only thing. We're humans too. We're allowed to have other interests, but really, guys, come on now. It's like, there's a lot left to do still. But um yeah, I just think that body positivity, and it unfortunately isn't uh expanded to include this, but it should also be for things like disability and neurodivergence. And um usually people, when you talk about it, then they'll change to, like, oh, it's just preference or whatever, right? But wait, weight preference isn't? What? That literally makes no sense. It's funny how when it's something that like really actually viscerally makes people uncomfortable, like intellectual disability or physical disability, which for intellectual disability I can understand a little bit, right? Because there are issues around um people maybe not understanding consent there, but like, it just seems like cap to me, like a cop out. I'm sorry, I have to say it. Why is it preference when it's about a disability which someone can help versus weight? I'm sorry that I have to say it. Um and height, honestly, and height. Um I know some of you are gonna laugh at that, some of you are gonna call me whatever, but I have to be honest. Um, you're just not allowed to have any aesthetic critiques of society that go beyond the acceptable ones, because then people just brush it off with preference instead of saying, like, maybe there's something deeper there, maybe there's something systemic, because these same people can't realize that for whatever reason. Um, and my experience with being treated as dumb, I think is proof of that. I think it's proof that, again, like, disabled people need to start loving themselves, start being with each other, start demanding that um the organizations and institutions of community which have to do with us are run by us and for us, and not our caregivers or our parents. Not to say they shouldn't have a seat at the table, of course they should, but yeah, I feel like it's a change, that ideological change within the disabled community that needs to happen. That, you know, we've been sold this lie of just be like all of the rest of them. When, I'm sorry, but able bodied people have not shown, the vast majority have not shown themselves to be capable of wanting us to be integrated. Um, Alright, thank you guys. Ran over. I appreciate you listening.